episode 169 of Silver Lining for Learning. And I'm so excited to have arranged this episode, which is about the MENA region, Mideast and North Africa. This is a very crucial part of the world in which there are many opportunities that are emerging, but also, of course, many challenges as well. And we're so privileged to have our three guest experts with us today. Shireen is someone who is an alumni of our master's program at Harvard. I had the privilege of working with her when she was there, and she brought a lot of knowledge and skills to the cohort and has been a valued colleague since then. And Elyas is the head of the WISE Foundation in the region, which has a lot of pioneering initiatives. And Rami is someone that I have worked with in the past in terms of initiatives in the Mideast, and very happy to have the opportunity to interact with him again. So I'm Chris Dede from Harvard. With me are my three co-hosts, Punya Mishra from Arizona State, Kurt Bonk from Indiana University, and Yang Zhao from the University of Kansas and the University of Melbourne. So I'm going to begin by asking each of our guests to tell us a little bit about themselves and also about the kinds of topics that they'd like to make sure we discuss today. So Shireen, I'm going to start with you. You're muted.
Thank you, Professor Dede. I know you always ask me to call you Chris, never getting to it. So very happy to be with you and your co-host. Thank you so much for having us and with my colleagues, Rami and Elyas. I'm Shireen Yacoub, Managing Partner at Istidama Consulting. We offer socioeconomic development advisory and research. So I've been working closely with donor organizations and INGOs recently, working in the space of education and refugee support and youth development, and excited to share insights on these fronts when it comes to higher education programming for refugees and the importance of localization. I've been involved in EdTech for the past 10 years. Previously, I was part of the founding team at IDRAK, an open online learning platform serving 7 million learners across the MENA region. And before that, I was engaged within the nonprofit space, working on youth empowerment and employability programs. So I also have insights from that angle in terms of donor-funded programming and so on. I'm excited about today's session where we share not only challenges, but opportunities and transformations happening right now in the MENA region, transforming the landscape. As you know, we have 2/3 of our population under 35. So we are at the pivotal juncture where education can really or holds the potential to shape the development trajectory of the region. We will address the skills gap that we have and the tensions holding education back, whether we're talking about skills and credentials versus degrees, traditional teaching methods versus modern inquiry-based approaches, centralized versus control, and autonomy, and finally adherence to traditional versus modernity in education. So I'm excited to be here, and I will leave the room now to my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we can dive in.
Elyas?
Hello, everyone. My name is Elyas Felfoul. I am very happy to be with you today for this insightful session, trying to demystify some of the topics related to youth education and employment in the MENA region. I think I wouldn't be here if probably my family didn't immigrate to Canada in 1995 when I was 12. So I benefited from a very good Canadian education that gave me the possibility to have this beautiful international journey. So I did work in Canada. I did some study in Singapore, and I joined WISE, the World Innovation Summit for Education, about 10 years ago, helping to contribute to bring a global ecosystem to talk together and explore ideas and bring the topic to decision makers to promote innovation in education. Once again, I'm happy to be here, and I'd love to discuss about some interesting challenges, but also opportunities for MENA region today, and have an exchange with all of the guests in this room today. Thank you again.
Rami?
Well, thank you very much. It's a privilege, Dr. Didi, to be here, and our co-host and my colleagues, Shireen and Yas. Look forward for a fruitful conversation. Just a bit about my background. I'm a veteran of higher education sector, where I worked with a lot of universities across in the US and in the MENA region, particularly in Egypt, for 4 years. And the past 10 years has been very inspirational, where I saw the transformation that is happening in the MENA region, and in particular in the GCC, in education. And right now I'm based in Dubai, and I work in the education field. As you can imagine, the countries in the GCC realize the world is changing fast. They need to sustain a future for their countries, their people, and a way to move from the oil economy and diversify their economic plans. So education being a key pillar that links directly to the economic productivity of these countries and across all sectors, not the center of education, became very important. And as Shireen said, 2/3 of the region is below the age of 30. I was just reading recently, 78% of employers think that their employees need to reskill in the next couple of years. So there is a lot of emphasis in the region. And right now, I'm fortunate to be part of PwC Education and Skills Practice, which is a dedicated practice focusing on education in the region. Really taking that journey of discovery, observing the region's pains and successes, and understanding their challenges, and helping them taking the first steps to innovate and find solutions to revamp their education system. Excited to be here again, and some of the topics I'd love to highlight is the transformation of the Center of Education in GCC countries, their skilling and reskilling agendas, and the academic governance that is changing the shape of education.
So I know that we want to talk about shifts in education, but I just want to start by talking about youth. Over half a century ago, when I was a youth, I remember being really annoyed with my parents and their generation because, we were inheriting the Cold War, we were inheriting, the mess in Vietnam, riots in the United States because of civil rights. And I just felt that their generation had really messed things up, and I was going to leave a much better world for my children. So here we are, and my children have at least as much cause to be upset with my generation, our generation, because they've got climate change, they've got the rise of authoritarianism in different forms across the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe every generation ends up feeling that way. But what's front of mind for youth right now in the region? As they think about education, as they think about employment, as they think about the society, what's front of mind for them?
So I can start if you want. In our communities, especially within the MENA region, and at least the surroundings that we have and have been exposed to, in our parents' generation, it was always the belief that if we invest in education, this is the passport or key to a better future we can give to our kids. So any middle income family or even low income family would actually, deprive itself from other necessities in life just to invest in their kids' education, believing that this is the insurance or the passport to success in a better life ticket they can give to their kids. But unfortunately, now with everything that's happening, I'm not sure that the new generation feels the same way. They're realizing more and more that there is no bulletproof and future-proofing through any ticket. It's just a constantly changing landscape where you have to keep upskilling and reskilling, and with everything that's happening with the technological advancement and now AI and everything we're seeing, there is some sort of this less assurance around how do you future or bulletproof your future through education. But I don't think that this is necessarily just something related to the MENA region. It's kind of the same everywhere. But I must say also that there has been some frustration among youth with the outcomes of their education. They feel that, I don't want to stereotype and generalize, but there is a general sense that, education is no longer preparing them for the job market. And this is why we say there is a huge skills gap. Constantly, we're hearing that the private sector or hiring companies find it very hard to fill vacancies they have because they feel that there's a mismatch between what they're getting and where the youth are today, and not just in the technical aspect, but more so in the life skills or power skills when it comes to critical thinking, communication skills, and the like. So obviously, this is also translating into a high unemployment rate. That's not just, the fault of the education system, to be fair. It's also a reflection of everything happening in the political and economic sphere. But the result is that we have so many youth, around 30% on average or more, that are unemployed, and they don't have access to livelihood. And that's frustrating because it's affecting every aspect of their life. So I'm going to stop here and just leave some room for Rami and Elyas to interject as well.
Thank you for starting, Shireen. I'll just complement some of this introduction by giving a bit of numbers to give us a bit of perspective on youth, and then I love to make comparison with different times. So the region has a substantial number of youth. We're looking at 28% the age population between 15 to 29 years old. And this represents about over 100 million young people. That's a huge number. And usually, if you look at history of Europe, when they started the modernization after the Second World War, they made the progress based on a young population. So why is not happening in our case? Question mark, right? I don't have the answer. I'm just asking some questions today. In order to accommodate the significant influx of youth into the workforce, we need to create basically that amount of number. So if we project from now to 2050, we need 300 million jobs. There's no way the region is going to be able to create that amount of jobs. And many things. I mean, when I come back to, so I've been going back more often to Tunisia, Morocco. I know a little bit more the North African landscape, and you do have even within these countries a massive separation of talent. So you still have the elite, that have access to certain level of education that it is adapted to the reality of the market and so on. But the big majority of the country and the public, what the public schools offer, is completely disconnected. So, if I look at the past and I look at my father's education, he still correct me on my French. He still correct me on my Arabic. I mean, it's unbelievable what they had in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And then things have started to descend into a place where we were unable to, we're unable to make reforms and envision what the future is going to look like, to adapt and prepare our young population to the the need of the market.
Yes, I can't agree with you more, and Shireen. I think something that popped in my mind while you are speaking, which is more of the futuristic. What are we trying to achieve, and where are we heading? We know we can't find jobs for all of this people. So what do we do? And one big answer is around innovation and teaching people how to think to create their own jobs. Things are changing very quickly. So, one thing, that transversal skills, your behavioral, your emotional skills, to make you able to adjust and move around the changing environment, to be able to create your own job. And everyone has something special. We know that. You don't need to learn, unless it's a technical skill, of course. But then not everyone is going to be working on a technical skill. Not everyone's going to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. So there is a room to, I think, as education goes forward, to focus on skills that enable you to always think outside the box, or think how to create, again, your own job. I think this is something that I always look after in what we tell, the young generation.
I think, to Rami's point, maybe a little bit of context. There's a significant portion of youth historically preferring to work for the public sector in the MENA region. So the public sector has been the key employer of the majority of the population for years. And as things evolve and things change, there has to be also an equivalent or a speedy change in the mindset as well, so that we can start shifting towards the private sector, who has been previously viewed as less stable, not offering as many benefits, and maybe like the prestigious also component of wanting certain jobs for your kids. So raising them up to wanting to be, a doctor and an engineer. These are all cultural and social norms that require some mindset shift that needs to happen as well.
Very true.
So, Chris, do you have something to add? Okay. So as I was preparing for, doing my little bit of homework before the show, I was trying to sort of look at what the MENA region, what countries, and then I got to the Wikipedia page, which gave like 7 different definitions depending on which organization defines that region. So I just was curious, because just even looking at like the 17 or 18 countries which seem to appear there, there's a lot of difference between these countries as well, both culturally, historically, economically. And I'm sort of wondering, because education is so deeply connected to culture and context, and so can you speak a little bit to the diversity of countries within that? Because I think it's not, what you spoke to was the commonality, which is the number of youth who are, but there is also these differences between them, and how that I think also is part of the challenge. So maybe you can speak a little bit to the diversity within how we think about this range of countries, because if you're looking at like Algeria versus Morocco versus Palestine, you have a very different set of challenges within each space. So anybody can go forward.
Happy to start with this question. and because I've been myself trying to understand my own regions. so it's interesting because I come from Tunisia, which is what we consider North Africa. We were colonized by the French, so our second language, which is really sometimes the first language in many places, is French. And I think the first information, for folks who are listening to us to understand, is yes, there is an interesting case here because there is over 400 million what we call native speakers of Arabic in the region. However, this is divided in my view, first of all, into two categories. First of all, the people who have a French background, and then the people who have an English background because of the history, and then the people who just kind of stick to a little bit of conservatism, where they speak. They kept using the Arabic language as a tool of education, because in most cases, at certain degrees, they start mixing Arabic and a second language, either French or English. But the one definition that I will guide our audience to read is I've been following the work of an amazing person. His name is Nafis Dakak. I think he's a good friend of Shireen, I guess. He's from Jordan, and he tried to really explain what is the differences between MENA region, not based on geographical kind of categories, which is the North African, the GCC, MENA, and the Levant, but mainly on economic conditions. So he divide MENA into three categories, which they call the MENA 1, MENA 2, MENA 3, super easy. And he divided basically MENA 1, which is the rich MENA, which is very, very if you look at it from a perspective of a comparison to a modern country, it will be kind of advanced economies such as France. So you have $1 trillion GDP, 42 million people, potential consumers. So and this is across the whole region, right? So we're not only in the GCC, or so you take the whole MENA and you find 42 million people who have basically a GDP per capita of $40,000, which is and these people live in a reality very much linked to the world in the Western countries. The second MENA is GDP of $850 billion, and that's across 171 million consumers. And that's about approximately a GDP of $4,900. And this is where the big conflict is. This is the category where they want to modernize, but they don't want to westernize. And we have that thing, by the way. We have that thing of modernization without westernization, and we never really cracked the code yet on that. And I believe that could be, if we manage to modernize without necessarily westernize, because the whole conflict is there, in my view. So you have that big category of 171 million consumers, people around the whole region, and that's the region that basically they're comfortable in Arabic, but also comfortable in another language, but not really comfortable in both languages. So you have a lot of conflict from that perspective. And then the overwhelming majority, unfortunately, sits in what Nafis called MENA 3, which is 224 million people, GDP of $1,000 to $50,000, and that's basically he compares it a lot to a place like Pakistan, where you have a lot of low education solutions and so on. So I really like this definition, because it gives us a bit more perspective, because the Arab world is evolving. You take a place like Algeria, who has a very, very deep connection to France. They just announced that they're moving away from an education in French. They're moving to English. So you have that movement, and even young people in North Africa, which they've been up to 10 years ago only francophone. Now the main language of this youth are English. So there is a lot of movement in the region. and happy to share more once I hear Rami and Shireen point of view on this topic. Yeah.
So yeah, before Rami and Shireen jump in, so Elyas, I really like the way you framed this, because when I look at some place like India, people think of it as one country, but actually it is like 4 countries. You know what I mean? Like if you look at different strata of society, different groups and so on. So this is sort of a really interesting way of thinking about that region. So thank you for that. Shireen, Rami?
I honestly can't agree more with Ilyas. Really, the best way to really split the Middle East is based on economical diversity. You have such like GCC countries, which are in MENA 1, I think you called it, yes. And it makes total sense. So thank you. I enjoyed actually this.
So, I pretty much have nothing more to add. I think Nafis has captured it very well. Nafis is also an alum of Hugsy, and I believe he took some courses with Professor Didi. So I hope he's watching. We say hi. And just one thing that comes out of this as well is I think there are so many decisions that are affected by these similarities and these differences, big and small. So for example, one of the key decisions when I was at DOC, we had to grapple with was what curriculum or what Arabic do we offer the course in, so that it is widely understood by the majority of MENA learners. Because even within education, we have this question about Fusha, which is the official language, and then we have the modern standard Arabic, which is the white Arabic that is probably closer to the ear, less rigid. So there's also this tension on which language do you use, and it becomes even more complicated when you go to K-12, because children are not as exposed to Fusha as they are to their colloquial language spoken at the house. So to them, it's like learning a foreign language. It's very complicated. I even struggle with my children when we read books, that the terms and the vocabs are quite different. So thank you for bringing this up, because when we say MENA, yes, there are similarities, but there are also major differences that shape very critical decisions when it comes to program design, delivery, even the cultural nuances that need to be addressed.
I know Kurt has a question, but thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that always amazes me is sort of the long finger of colonialism, where lines were drawn pretty much at random by a bunch of people sitting somewhere in England, which have now determined the lives of millions of people in bizarre, crude, weird ways. That is something that you really just have to confront that history of that really determines a lot of the history of how people live their everyday lives. And I think that's something, it just brings home to me sort of the contingencies of history and how they affect individual lives in some ways. So I know Kurt is waiting with a question.
Well, actually, it was Kurt. I don't know what your question is. I actually have a follow-up that really aligns what was discussed. So Kurt,
Sure.
unless
Go
you have
ahead.
something similar you want me, can I go first?
Sure.
Okay, you look good, so I can go first. Anyway, I was Elyas, what you suggested, that was really powerful. Modernization without Westernization. I think in the world, almost every tiny place is debating about that. So if you look at the examples, I think Singapore, you kept mentioning, right, might be a good example of being Westernized, but still being Singapore. Another country might be Japan, I think, right? Japan has still maintains a long tradition, but it's quite modernized. I was just back in China. You can say China 1, China 2, China 3. There are a lot of China ones. They are sending the kids to international schools, get a Western education. the Western could be British, France, Australia, Canada, US is, and they pay a lot of money. Actually, I was very surprised. For example, in this school in Beijing, they're in teach the kids to almost forget Chinese, which is very awkward, weird, no. So my question to all three of you has to do with Westernization. How important is to Westernize? Because in many ways, the finance system, for example, right? How do we finance the market? How to run that? It's Westernized. So can we truly modernize without being, we call, Westernized, without being completely Westernized? And I bet all three of you seem to have had some education in a Western world. How that have affected you? And Pune is from India, I'm from China, so we kind of got away from those two countries, so we're not really part of those countries. But this is a very fascinating topic to think about that. So any one of you guys, I would love to hear your personal experience and your reactions, and say how far we can go with this. It's a very interesting topic.
Since I brought it up to the group, I'll take the first shot on this. Look, I think our region, again, I'm gonna face a bit of controversy here, but I think we need to be pragmatic. I think, yes, colonialism has been in many cases very difficult. However, there is also some good foundation to things related to knowledge, and that's history of humanity. There's always been power controlling others and moving on. I think where we need to find peace and harmony and move forward and build a better future for our people is with a pragmatic approach. Completely dismissing everything, in my view, is a wrong approach. I think we need to take what is working for us, and the exercise that has to be done is really to contextualize it to our reality. That's what has to be done. I think wise people such as Lee Kuan Yew has said always, beautiful things exist everywhere. You just need to copy it and adapt it to your reality. And that's the success of places like Singapore, right? I think, in my view, that's what is missing in our case. I think it's missing a little bit of pragmatism and a little bit of, we need to move away from just thinking that the past is better. I think there is fundamentally something in the Arab world mindset when we say when we talk about the mind shift is about how do we move away from this very important historical era of creativity and knowledge, and then we went 600 years without providing much, and then we just need that leapfrog to move forward, and for me, one word could describe the solution is pragmatism.
Rami or Shireen, do you guys have anything to add to the pragmatism, how practical we can be, how pragmatic we can be? You guys have anything to add about
I would
this?
add one thing. When we say Westernize, what does it mean? Really, I don't agree much with the word Westernize, because we are looking exactly what Elyas said. There was an era where this region or this area was actually providing the knowledge and the new things to the world. Now it's a different era where other people are providing the good practices that seems to have worked for the past 200 years. And it's good to learn from it, I think, and get something good out of it. My biggest, I'm taking this, and the question for me is, how do you localize and move forward? So what we try to do a lot is localize it. I think moving forward is the next step is how you innovate. We're stuck in our own systems, but we always recently are trying to say, and this is maybe not across the MENA region, but people who can afford it, where let's think outside the box while we're thinking within these boundaries. we're still stuck with a bit of boundaries, and we're taking good practice with these boundaries, which we're calling westernized. But there's good things out there. We'll take it, take what's good for us and localize it. Or
I like
add the local flavor to it.
You know, I like the emphasis here because so many people across the world seem to believe that somehow we need to homogenize. Somehow we need to pick something that's best, and then everybody, you know, follows that path. But what we know in the evolution of knowledge and ethics and prosperity is that diversity is what's the key. It's having multiple perspectives. It's having an ecosystem of societies that play different roles and that complement one another in powerful ways. And so I think that asking, each of us asking what makes us unique and how do we contribute to the ecosystem is really important, because so many people, you see this with AI now, people are saying, well, now we only need one language because AI is going to translate everything. What a terrible idea to throw away all those different ways of thinking. Now we just have one expert, which is AI. You know, just write a prompt and you'll get your answer. Well, not if you understand the limitations of AI, but there's this powerful tendency on the part of many people to be afraid of people who are different and to want everyone to be the same. And nothing could be further from the truth in terms of education and in terms of economic development. Kurt, I don't want to preempt you any further. Why don't you jump into this?
I think Shireen had a comment. She was going to jump in, and then I'll go after Shireen. Go ahead, Shireen.
Let's go ahead with your question. I'll park my idea. I just wanted to build on what Professor Didi was saying, and as a segue to the importance of localization. And I see this all the time, working closely with stakeholders, working in the space of refugee education or higher education in emergency settings. And oftentimes, or at least the narrative that I used to hear was like, these well-intentioned programs, obviously they rallying efforts to make a difference and support, they felt parachuted a lot of times, either neglecting the cultural, social, or even the need for psychosocial support. So a lot of times the program would focus on the pedagogy and the content and the curriculum and how to get it the accreditation. And they forgot that the learner who has lost everything they're used to was looking for some sense of normalcy by going to a classroom and being part of a group and having a conversation and connecting with them and feeling supported. So taking that away from the experience meant that they lost their motivation for it. So when I speak to many learners and even organizations working in the space, there's now this realization, for example, that blended is one of the best approaches we can deliver these programs, because you know the students can come to the learning hub or whatever it is, leverage e-learning and technology, but also be part of a group with a facilitator. Another aspect was language. Some refugees were expected to master a certain level of English before they were able to engage in accredited higher education because of the requirements of accreditation. But these are refugees who have, for example, never learned English or learned very basic English, not to the extent where they can learn STEM in such language. So these even added more hurdles to it. Some details around the camp not having electricity. Okay, you are giving me a connection or a program online, but I don't even have electricity to charge my phone, or we are 7 in the tent, who gets to use the phone? So these are some critical learnings that I've come to find consensus around when talking about the need for localization, especially when it comes to vulnerable communities, IDPs and refugees. Sorry, Kurt, back to you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. This has been an interesting conversation, so much so that I was going to say we need to have part 2 on the MENA region, but actually we do have part 2 next month. We have a WISE winner coming on the show, Aline Sira, the co-founder and CEO of Natakalam, if I'm pronouncing that right, working with Syrian refugees. That will be in November. I don't know the exact date, but we'll look it up before the show is over. So that's my comment. Now my question, an evolving one during this conversation that we've all had here, but I've spent some time in the region. In particular, I help people run conferences in the UAE, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi with the higher colleges of technology there. I also did some work in Saudi at King Khalid University and King Saud University, and of course, Saudi Aramco and other places there all throughout the country. And I just got back from Egypt last week, working with the American University in Cairo, where Rami has worked in the past, apparently. So when I go to these places and I help people at the conferences, they all, especially when I first started about 20 years ago, they all want to be the leader in e-learning in the space of called e-learning in the region. They want to be or national or international leader, right? And then I go to the conference and I talk to the people from the respective countries, or they'd come up to me after my talk and say, "Can you tell, so and so, the president of such and such university, or the people in charge of the Ministry of Education, that e-learning is just as good, if not better, than face-to-face learning oftentimes. They'll check my passport to see if I've actually left the country. It might say Indiana University MBA from Kelly School. It doesn't say online MBA at all. But they won't respect it because they'll know I haven't left the country. I've stayed here in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or in Riyadh or wherever." And so that's a troublesome issue when you have people talking out of both sides of the mouth. They want to be a leader, but they don't respect it, right? They want to embrace it on the one hand because it's the hot topic of today, but yet they don't understand what benefits it has for the different learners of their region, of their country. And you all set up this particular session in this blog post, talked about unemployment of youth in the region. It talked about reskilling and upskilling needs of 78% or something like that. Employers suggest that we need reskilling and upskilling. So given that, and given that we have one of the people in charge of the WISE Awards here, what solutions have evolved over the past decade or so, or what options do young people have to fill that gap? Because we can't build universities fast enough, right, for face-to-face experiences. So what kinds of things are now on the cusp of forming different solutions for the region? Might be micro-credentials or something else. And who should we look to as the leaders in the region? What institutions, organizations, countries are the leaders that we should be reading about and bringing on the show maybe in the future? So it's a two-part question. Where do the solutions lie, and who are providing those solutions today? Thank you. Everyone's quiet.
Is it addressed to a particular person, or maybe
all
Shireen
of you,
start?
please. Yes, please, all of you.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
I thought originally you were talking about WISE and you wanted that perspective. That's why I stepped back. So there's a lot happening in the space, and COVID has been the biggest advocate for e-learning, and it has propelled and forced so many entities and systems into e-learning. But the caveat is that it was not done 100% correctly, right? Because it was out of an emergency response. So the flip side of it was, we tried this during COVID and it didn't work. Yes, because it took like 10 days for us to set something up, and it started evolving, and we had to work around it in many cases. So the online education is still not 100% accredited throughout the MENA region equally, but we are seeing some policy changes taking place with ministries of higher education more and more recognizing that, you know, it's here to stay, it's the future. We need to get on board, leverage it, and maybe even leapfrog some of our programs so that, you know, we don't try to play catch up all the time. Maybe this is an opportunity to innovate and usher ourselves into a bright future. We have many universities that are doing a great job. KAUST in Saudi Arabia is one example. There are others. There are many platforms like Idrak, Abwab, Al-Mentor, A'nab for teacher development. So there is also a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship happening in the space. We're realizing more and more that the learners themselves, you know, they need to be equipped with digital literacy and digital skills. We need to empower them with these skills because they will need it wherever they engage in the workforce or starting their own businesses. So it's becoming more and more accepted. It's just how are we going to go around accreditation, for example. So as an example, in Jordan, recently, the Ministry of Higher Education passed a new regulation through which there is a start for accrediting 30% of the program online, and it's, you know, gradually going to go up to even a higher percentage, allowing universities to create online programs and hybrid learning programs. There is also the introduction of dual studies, where you study and work at the same time, combining academia with vocational training. One of the notable universities doing this is the German Jordanian University. Recently, there was a launch of the Al-Hussein Technical University, which also focuses on promoting modern learning with vocational training. So we do see these changes. It's not maybe as fast as we'd like it to be, but I think the infrastructure is getting there. The one thing that we need to maybe keep an eye on and collectively work on, whether it's public sector or private sector, is the digital poverty. And by digital poverty is like the digital divide is the new face of inequality. How much access do we have not only to the internet and smartphones, but also to digital skills that allow us and enable us to engage with all these resources and the OERs out there, and maybe even the micro-credentialing and the skilling programs that we are seeing. I don't want to take all the room, so I'll leave some space for my colleagues to speak to that.
That was wonderful. And I just want to point out that if any students are watching or listening to this session, or any professors and want to have a series related to the MENA region, we've had episodes in the past on Egypt. In fact, the American University of Cairo had Malab Ali and Nadine in talking about OER and e-learning in Egypt. We've had a show on Palestine. We've had another show with Israel. And again, we'll have one coming up with Syrian refugees. So that we might have more, we'll definitely have more in the future. Elise or Rami, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think not particularly in higher education, but in general, I think the answer is not everything. Yeah, not everything fits the same criteria. You know, you all know what the approach that we're taking now in, for example, helping our clients in course design. When we look at the learning objectives, we assess what is the best media and method to actually teach this. Some high-risk sectors, you can't teach it online, you can't simulate it, you need to do it live. Others, where there is low risk, you can actually teach it online and ensure that it's the message can be delivered online. So I think there is no one size fits all. The other thing that I think Shireen touched on is we're looking at a lot of examples of adaptive learning now. And mainly I'm seeing it more in the GCC region. For example, in Abu Dhabi government, how they teach their employees. They're really trying to take this approach of adaptive learning. So each one has their own personalized pathway, depending on the knowledge and skills that you need to require for your job. This is one approach. And you mentioned higher education, higher colleges of technology. They just changed their strategy. They're moving all the way to apprenticeships. So they really believe that the education needs to be tied to a job market. And they are an applied university, which is different than a higher education, proper research. They're more in the applied research, applied university, where they're looking at apprenticeship as the way to move forward, because it gets you to learn and on the job, but also in the classroom from a theoretical perspective. The last piece that I think triggered my thinking is the micro-credentials, which we're hearing a lot about in Saudi. Everyone's talking micro-credentials, micro-credentials. They want to stack up things from different places and come up with a degree. And one of the biggest sectors that never existed 5 years ago is arts and culture. And we're working a lot. Of course, arts and culture has been for thousands of years there. It's embedded in the people. People do it, but it's never formally taught. And now we're seeing what I call corporate universities or corporate academies that are focused in music, in arts, in traditional arts in particular. They are trying to build their program based on micro-credentials. They want to stack up basic things, and you you basically design your own program within the field that you think you want to focus on. So this is just a couple of thoughts that came to mind from your question and Shireen's points.
And to complement both colleagues, I think, or to summarize, I think the key word is skills. I think we're moving away from just education to we need to know how people know what is needed to do a certain job. That's why we see a lot of changes and there's a sentence, basically, I'm sure everyone heard of it. It's not what you know, it's who you know. I think now we're gonna say it's what you know, not where you go.
Exactly.
Companies are about to swap, in my view, and we see this trend in the US. I think companies are about to swap out degrees for skills-based hiring. And at best, degrees are kind of weak proxies for skills, and in many cases, what's happening right now, I think they block degrees are blocking millions from opportunity that they are really qualified for.
I think this is a fascinating conversation. Like Kurt said, we should need a MENA too. So I just want to make some comments, because like WISE, PwC, and all the consulting, we've all been to the Middle East. I've been many countries, and the more ministries of education are worried and concerned about education. We also have had students from Kuwait and from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, and all among different places. I just found it's very interesting. On the one hand, I think I heard Rami talking about we were the center of knowledge 600 years ago. Now we are learning from others. I like the pragmatism about those things. But at the same time, the region is heavily relying on Western organizations to bring knowledge in. I know you've hired education consulting companies from the UK come to run our schools. We've hired people from Australia come to run our schools. We're borrowing from Canada, right? It's fascinating to think about how the many forces are trying to bring education, different ideas. It's diversification is great. So just, I don't think we have time really to discuss this. I just, saw the news of the war now between Israel and Palestine, just happening now. So it's fascinating to think about, or it's also sad to think about all these cultural conflicts, all these kind of things, and where education can stand? I know Chris has a question. Mine was more like kind of nonsensical comments that got me started thinking about it. Chris, go ahead.
So we're almost out of time, but I'm noticing an interesting tension here that all of us face when we think about online learning. So online learning has a lot of strengths. I know that in the years that I was at Harvard, the strongest class discussions that I had were during COVID, because there were so many people with a lot of experience who never would have moved to Cambridge to get a Harvard degree, who were part of these online communities and all across the world. I mean, typically there were 10 time zones in my classes, and there was such a rich interchange of diverse ideas and cultural perspectives and so on. So that's a great strength. Another strength of online, and we really haven't had a chance to talk about this, but not all 300 million jobs have to be created in the region if students have strong abilities to know how to work online. And you don't learn how to work online by being face-to-face. And one of the things that I'm dismayed about is that across the world, in every country, there's a strong movement to pretend COVID never happened, and remote learning never happened, and we're all going back to face-to-face. The world is hybrid now. You know, there is no going back for the world from face-to-face. And if education goes back, then we just graduate people who are ill-equipped to handle a hybrid world. But the other side of this tension is that community is really based on context and culture and native language and other things that are really intensely local. And that human beings are not going to become citizens of the world. That's just not how we're wired, right? We're always going to have something that's intensely local, that is fundamental in our identities. And so blended in a way isn't just thinking about, well, sometimes it's online and sometimes it's face-to-face. It's even more thinking about the fact that sometimes it's all about difference and diversity and taking a global strategic perspective. And sometimes blended is about being very local and face-to-face and working within your own culture and your own language and your own context to make a difference. And I don't know that anybody has really solved that dilemma, that tension, but I'm just interested in your opinions about the way that I framed that.
Okay, I can address this. I can't agree more. This is exactly what I meant by the importance of localization. And it's not purely just local solutions, because you do need some support and leveraging things that have worked elsewhere, that has been built using expertise. And it's just magnificent when you see how models are adapted, and that's the key when we talk about being agile. So it's not, there's something that works, there's some substance, there have been some efforts doing that. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Leverage this, customize it, localize it, make it closer to the context of the learners, because the one phrase that I always like to use, we really need to meet learners where they are, because this is where you can have a common ground, get them to where they need to be, but also without risking leaving so many behind. And when we talk about the importance of blended, and I think this is where the example that I shared previously around the needs for psychosocial, it could be other things for other learners, and you tap into it's kind of the best of both worlds. So you have the flexibility, the scalability, the cost effectiveness of e-learning, but you also have the in-person and the connection type of thing with the support. And what I've alluded to previously when I spoke about the digital divide and digital poverty, it's not just the infrastructure, as I mentioned, it's also the digital skills. Because oftentimes we now hear about AI replacing, so many, like automation and AI replacing so many jobs. But there is also the counter argument is that, it will not replace graphic designers per se, but a graphic designer who uses AI will definitely replace a graphic designer that doesn't. And that's just one example of how we need to empower youth with the digital skills they need to be able to compete in this constantly changing and evolving landscape. So it's just as important and critical as knowledge. And with the notion of that, there's a huge opportunity, like you mentioned, Professor Didi, around the gig economy, for example. If you have an economy in a face-to-face setup where it's saturated, there's huge unemployment, you can go extend beyond that, and through gig economy and online work and freelance, they are able to expand their access to opportunities that could never be possible for them wherever they are physically.
Well, we're out of time, as always. We run out of time before we run out of things to discuss, for sure. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate Elyas, Shireen, Rami. You really stimulated a lot of thought for us and for our audience. I come out of this with a sense of hope that even though there are very tough challenges in this region, there's also a lot of creativity, there's a lot of commitment, there's a lot of human talent, and these are the young people that are going to make the difference in the world. So we certainly need to give them every opportunity to unleash their creativity. So next week, we have a host's reflect. It seems like a long time since we've had one of those, a chance for us to step back, think about recent episodes, think about what's coming in the future. We will be doing that at noon Eastern Time next Saturday.